And while many approve of Judge Brett Kavanaugh taking the seat on the Supreme Court, others certainly disagree. A group here in New Orleans earlier today were moved to express their dissatisfaction. Jacqueline Quinn reports.
As protesters marched to the Supreme Court in D.C. to oppose Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation.
Cancel Kavanaugh! Cancel Kavanaugh!
Back here in New Orleans, local supporters joined in solidarity.
We believe Dr. Ford!
Demonstrators gathered at Lafayette Square at noon to send their messages of disapproval.
I think the confirmation hearings have been somewhat of a sham, and that the FBI investigation was rushed.
While some held signs opposing the nomination, others held signs for Dr. Christine Ford, who was thrust into the spotlight as she testified against Kavanaugh, alleging sexual assault at a high school party in 1982.
It seems we will have two sexual predators in the Supreme Court now, Clarence Thomas and Brett Kavanaugh.
Now, it's important to note neither men have ever been charged, though some feel strongly about the allegations. Marianne Freistadt worries in particular about Kavanaugh cementing a conservative majority, which she thinks will have severe impacts to women's rights.
Women's reproductive rights, he's going to vote against abortion rights, against contraception rights.
Clay Latimer with the Louisiana Courts Matter Coalition is worried about broader issues.
They decide immigration issues, whether people can stay in this country or not. They decide health care issues of whether we're going to continue to have access to the things that are offered by the Affordable Care Act.
As today's protest wrapped up, word spread that Kavanaugh would be confirmed with a 50 to 48 Senate vote. And that's why those who came out today say the effort won't stop here.
Dial that 202 number and let Kennedy and Cassidy know we don't agree.
In Lafayette Square, Jacqueline Quinn, Eyewitness News.